The sky above Loria 9 was a deep violet, the planet's thick atmosphere tinged with streaks of orange from the distant sun. The air crackled with the tension of impending war, a war that had been brewing for years. It was supposed to be a routine attack. General Zarnok had led dozens of planetary invasions. Crushing human resistance was just another mission. Another easy conquest. But Loria 9, this green and blue jewel on the edge of human territory, was different. And Zarnok had underestimated its defenders. Captain Thomas Hale stood on the balcony of the command center, his sharp eyes scanning the battlefield through the reinforced glass. Below him, the sprawling military city of Loria 9's capital city was on fire. The first wave of Xy'athar troops had breached the outer perimeter. The enemy forces, formidable in size and strength, advanced with brutal efficiency. The roar of alien war machines echoed in the air, and the sharp whine of artillery fire cut through the atmosphere. All units, fall back to the secondary lines. Now! Hale barked into his comm, his voice calm but commanding. He didn't need to yell. His soldiers respected him. They trusted him. He turned to his team, an assortment of officers and strategists standing by, their faces lit by the flickering glow of the command screens. Sergeant Ramirez, a battle-hardened veteran, met Hale's gaze. "They're moving fast, sir. Their forces are heavier than we thought." "We knew they'd come hard," Hale said, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the table. "But they won't expect us to fight back like this. You know the drill. We keep them contained. Slow them down." He tapped a series of commands on the console in front of him. The data streams on the screen shifted, outlining the positions of the enemy forces and key human strongholds. Ramirez glanced at the map and then back to Hale. "Sir, we're going to need every trap we've set. If we don't..." "We will," Hale interrupted. His voice was low, sure. "Let's make sure they don't get another inch. Get to your posts." Ramirez nodded, then hurried out with the rest of the team. Outside, the Xy'athar forces advanced, towering war machines stomping through the planet's jungles. Their armor, a sleek metallic black, reflected the crimson glow of the firestorm that raged across the horizon. But it wasn't just the machines Hale was concerned about. It was the soldiers, Xy'athar elites with their cold, reptilian eyes, and relentless determination. They had come with one purpose, to erase the human presence from this sector. The first wave collided with the defenses. Zarnok had predicted a swift victory, but what he hadn't accounted for was the intricate web of traps set by the humans. The mines had been placed with pinpoint accuracy, the remote-controlled drones launched from hidden bunkers. Explosions rocked the battlefield as the Xy'athar soldiers found themselves caught in a deadly dance of maneuver and destruction. Hale watched the chaos unfold below. His pulse was steady. This was his element. Calm amidst the storm. "Initiate Phase 1, Hale said into his comm, giving the order that would begin the trap that would pull Zarnok's forces deeper into the human defenses. Within moments, the first of the Xy'athar elite soldiers, his armor adorned with gold and red, moved into position. The soldier's eyes glowed, scanning the terrain. He was smart. But not smart enough. The ground beneath them shifted. The jungle that had been a serene backdrop moments ago became an artificial labyrinth of traps. The ground opened up beneath their feet, human-engineered chasms, forcing the soldiers into narrow, confined spaces. Hale's strategy wasn't just about technology. It was about human ingenuity. Zarnok watched from his command center aboard the flagship. He clenched his fists, furious as his forces struggled to gain ground. He knew the humans were resourceful, but this was an unexpected level of defiance. He gritted his teeth, then issued an order: "Move forward. Push them back. We're not here to play games." His voice was cold and commanding, but the tension was beginning to show in his eyes. Zarnok's confidence was faltering. He had underestimated the humans before. He would not make that mistake again. "Prepare the secondary strike. I'll crush them personally." But Hale's trap was far from over. As the Xy'athar forces moved deeper into the city, Hale activated the second phase. The ground beneath them buckled, and structures that had been constructed to withstand bombardments, built into the very bedrock of Loria 9, shifted and locked into position. Hidden turrets erupted from the earth, firing a barrage of plasma at the Xy'athar war machines. The alien forces tried to adapt, but the maze of traps was too much to overcome. The humans had fought this battle in their minds long before it ever reached the surface. Zarnok's frustration grew. The battlefield was now a twisted maze of craters, smoke, and the bodies of fallen Xy'athar soldiers. He watched in horror as one of his command officers stumbled through the chaos. "General, we're losing control. They've turned the city into a death trap." Zarnok's eyes narrowed, his voice low with venom. "I told you to be prepared for the unexpected. Now we take the fight to them." On the ground, Hale's team moved with calculated precision. Sergeant Ramirez led a squad of soldiers, picking off straggling Xy'athar soldiers who had gotten separated from the main force. Hale watched as they moved forward in coordinated formations, taking out targets with deadly accuracy. His soldiers were disciplined, prepared for anything. They moved with a purpose that the Xy'athar couldn't match. In the command center, Hale's attention never wavered. His mind processed the data, his eyes darting across the various feeds. "Keep them on the run," he said softly, almost to himself. "Make them pay for every inch they take." The battle was far from over, but Hale knew one thing for sure: Zarnok had just made the first of many miscalculations. And it was the humans' resilience, their refusal to be broken, that would turn the tide. The Xy'athar may have the numbers, but the humans had something far more dangerous: cunning, unpredictability, and an unwavering will to survive. As the first wave of enemy soldiers began to retreat, Hale's voice broke through the chaos. "Phase 2 complete. Initiating Phase 3. Get ready to finish this." And with that, Loria 9's defenses went into full swing, the human resolve burning brighter than ever. The air in the command center was thick with tension. Outside, the once crystal skies of Loria 9 had darkened into a smoky haze, lit only by the flicker of distant explosions. The first wave of the Xy'athar forces had been repelled, but Hale knew better than to celebrate too soon. Zarnok's forces were relentless, and they would adapt. Captain Thomas Hale stood before the holographic map, his sharp eyes scanning the battlefield. The enemy had been pushed back, farther than expected, but Hale was a realist. "We've barely scratched the surface," he muttered to himself. "Sir," Sergeant Ramirez's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got reports of Xy'athar reinforcements arriving at the southern flank. They're moving fast. They're adapting." Hale's face tightened. "I expected them to do that. Prepare the next wave. We've got to slow them down for as long as possible." The soldiers in the command center scrambled into action. The hum of communication devices filled the space as orders flew in every direction. Outside, the battle raged. The humans' defenses were working, but Zarnok's cruelty and discipline were beginning to show. The first wave had been a surprise, the second would be a relentless push, and Hale had to make sure the humans were ready. As Hale continued to monitor the situation, he watched through the reinforced windows as explosions lit up the horizon, the clash of metal and fire consuming the distant city. The second wave was coming. On the battlefield, Zarnok's patience was wearing thin. He stood tall in the war room of his flagship, his icy eyes fixed on the planet below. His face, usually stern and composed, showed the cracks of frustration. "The humans fight like cornered animals," he muttered to his subordinate, the cold bite of his words heavy in the air. "But we will hunt them down. We will crush them." His lieutenant, a smaller, more jittery Xy'athar officer, stepped forward. "General, their defenses, they're not like anything we've encountered before. These humans, they're using the terrain against us." Zarnok's eyes flared with anger. "I know. They're clever, but we will outsmart them. Move all reinforcements to the southern flank. Deploy the heavy artillery. We will break them." Meanwhile, Hale was already one step ahead. "Activate Phase 3, he ordered. A series of interconnected systems within Loria 9's defenses hummed to life. Massive blast doors clanged open, revealing hidden artillery emplacements and anti-air systems. Beneath the city, hidden tunnels and storage facilities were unlocked, and a fresh wave of human resistance emerged. "We need more time," Hale said, his voice steady. "Longer than they think. Let's make them believe they're winning." His soldiers moved swiftly, their boots pounding against the metallic floors as they organized the next round of countermeasures. Hale had no illusions about the battle ahead. Zarnok would be relentless. But if humanity had one thing in its favor, it was the ability to surprise its enemies, to think and act in ways that were unpredictable. That's what made them dangerous. That's what would keep them alive. Outside, the roar of artillery fire and the whine of plasma blasts filled the air. Zarnok's second wave was beginning its advance. The humans had done well to hold the first wave, but this time, there would be no retreat. Zarnok had made it clear. The end would come swiftly. Or so he thought. As the first of Zarnok's massive war machines pushed forward, their engines roaring to life, they were met with a sudden, sharp burst of resistance. A hidden turret system unleashed a wave of high-velocity plasma rounds, taking out the lead vehicle in one powerful strike. The Xy'athar commander cursed under his breath. This is impossible," he muttered, watching as his forces were forced to take cover. The humans were fighting back harder than ever. "Return fire. Now." But the humans had already anticipated that. The terrain was their ally, and they knew it better than Zarnok ever would. The Xy'athar were forced to regroup, their lines scattering as human guerrilla units sprung from the underground bunkers, catching them off guard. A series of intense firefights broke out, but the humans were already on the move, retreating to secondary positions that they had set up days before. Back in the command center, Hale was watching it all unfold on the massive display. His mind was racing. The Xy'athar were adjusting. They were learning. And they were pushing forward. But Hale had one final card to play. "Activate the new defenses," Hale ordered sharply. From deep beneath Loria 9's surface, massive seismic charges were deployed. The ground itself seemed to tremble as a series of underground tunnels collapsed, releasing a barrage of rocky debris. The Xy'athar soldiers, advancing steadily, were suddenly caught in a storm of falling rocks and explosive charges. The ground shook beneath them as if the planet itself was fighting back. Zarnok's forces were scattered, and it took several minutes for them to regroup. But that wasn't the worst of it. Hale's trap wasn't over yet. The final part of the plan was already in motion. Hale stood before his officers, his voice calm. "They won't stop. Not yet. But we've got one final stage. Prepare the ambush. We hit them hard, we hit them fast. No mercy." The soldiers around him nodded, understanding the gravity of the plan. This would be the ultimate test. They had to push back Zarnok's forces long enough to force a retreat, or at least, a standstill. The battle for Loria 9 wasn't over, but Hale wasn't about to let the humans go down without showing the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. Zarnok's anger bubbled over. This is absurd," he shouted, his voice reverberating through his flagship. "Who do these humans think they are? We will wipe them out. All of them." He slammed his fist against the console, his face a mask of fury. The humans had proven difficult to crush. And now, Zarnok knew, he had underestimated them again. The tide was shifting, but he refused to acknowledge it. The humans will pay for this resistance. We will show them no mercy. But on the ground, Hale was already formulating the next move. His mind was sharp, his resolve unshaken. This was the moment of truth. The humans were cornered, but they would never give up. Not while Hale was in command. Not while they still had the will to fight. As the Xy'athar forces regrouped and the tension on the battlefield reached its peak, Hale's voice cut through the chaos once again. "Prepare for Phase 4. We're not backing down." And as the night stretched on, the outcome of the battle hung in the balance. But one thing was certain, no matter how many waves Zarnok sent, the humans weren't ready to lose. Not yet. The darkness of Loria Nine's night felt heavier than ever. The battle had been raging for hours, perhaps days, but time had become irrelevant to Captain Thomas Hale. Through the thick smoke of destroyed war machines and the static crackle of the comms, he stood unwavering. His eyes flicked from one battlefield report to the next. The Xy'athar were relentless, but so were the humans. The third wave had arrived, bigger, faster, more deadly than the last. Zarnok had finally committed his forces fully to the assault. Hale had expected as much. The Xy'athar general was predictable in his arrogance. He believed his troops, his war machines, would overwhelm the humans with sheer force. But Hale knew better. The Xy'athar might be skilled warriors, but they lacked the one thing humanity had: adaptability. Hale's voice was firm as he addressed his officers. "It's time. Prepare the final phase. We're going to hit them where it hurts." Sergeant Ramirez looked up from his station, his face drawn with exhaustion but still fierce. "What's the plan, sir?" "We're going to draw them in, make them think they've won," Hale said, his eyes glinting with resolve. "Then, we hit them hard and fast, just like we did with the others. We collapsed their lines." No hesitation. The team nodded, moving swiftly to their positions. In the heart of the battle, Zarnok's forces were advancing, convinced that victory was imminent. Hale watched them closely, tracking their movements with a tactical precision that only a handful of commanders could match. The aliens were powerful, yes, but they were overconfident. And that was a mistake. At that moment, Hale's comms buzzed with a report from the front lines. "Captain, we've got incoming. Elite Xy'athar troops are breaking through the eastern sector. They're moving toward the central bunker." Hale's fingers flew over his console. "We'll divert their attention. Push them into the trap. Activate the secondary fire grid on my mark." Ramirez's voice came through, calm but urgent. "Understood, sir. On your mark." Outside the command center, the Xy'athar forces roared toward the heart of the human stronghold. They were like a storm, violent, destructive, and relentless. But as they approached the city's center, they found themselves caught. The secondary fire grid opened up, launching a series of targeted strikes that tore through the advancing Xy'athar soldiers, scattering them in all directions. It was only for a moment, but that moment was enough. Zarnok's forces hesitated. They regrouped. And that's when the humans moved. Phase 4. "Now," Hale said. From beneath the earth, hidden doors opened, revealing a fresh barrage of human weaponry. Tanks, automated drones, and infantry forces surged from the depths of Loria 9, taking the Xy'athar by surprise. The battlefield was chaos, explosions, gunfire, and plasma rounds cutting through the air. Zarnok's forces were being torn apart from all sides. On Zarnok's flagship, the general's fists tightened on the console. "No! No more delays," he shouted, his voice raw with frustration. He was losing control, something that was almost unthinkable for him. He had come to Loria 9 expecting a quick victory, not this drawn-out battle that seemed to stretch beyond his grasp. "General," one of his officers said, fear creeping into his voice. "The humans, they're holding. We need reinforcements. The southern flank is almost overrun." Zarnok's eyes burned with rage. "What are you waiting for?" he snapped. "Send everything we've got." But it wasn't enough. As the reinforcements began to pour in, Hale's trap was set into motion. The humans had anticipated this final push. The carefully laid defenses, designed to confuse and split Zarnok's forces, turned the tide. The Xy'athar war machines, massive and powerful, became targets for precision strikes. The Xy'athar elite soldiers found themselves isolated, picked off by sniper fire and high-powered turrets. In the heart of the battlefield, the relentless assault on the Xy'athar lines continued. But this time, the fight wasn't just about firepower. This time, Hale was making the Xy'athar pay for every inch they gained. "Push them back!" Hale barked, rallying his soldiers. "We've got one chance. Take this ground, and they'll never get another inch." The humans, exhausted but resolute, fought with the fury of those who knew their backs were against the wall. There was no turning back now. They had given everything, and the Xy'athar were starting to crack. As the night dragged on, the battlefield grew quieter, the chaos beginning to slow. Hale stood at the edge of the command center, looking out over the war-torn landscape. His soldiers were holding strong, but he could feel the fatigue setting in. He needed to know where Zarnok was. The Xy'athar general had to be at his breaking point. Suddenly, the comms crackled. A voice, unfamiliar, filled the air. "This is General Zarnok. We have failed. This world is lost. But you will not escape this." Hale's face darkened. The message was cold, menacing, a final, defiant roar. It wasn't over. Zarnok wasn't done yet. The humans had won some ground, but the war was far from finished. "We're not finished yet," Hale muttered, gripping the edge of the command center. "Not while we're still breathing." Across the planet, the Xy'athar forces began retreating, but their movements were erratic, disjointed. Zarnok's leadership was unraveling. The general's arrogance had blinded him, had led him to underestimate humanity's will to survive. Zarnok, desperate to retain his authority, issued one last order: prepare the final weapon. The humans will learn to fear us. On the battlefield, Hale's mind raced. He knew this wasn't the end. Zarnok was no fool. He would fight to the bitter end. And now, the true test would begin. Humanity had proven it could resist, but could it outlast the final, desperate assault of an empire unwilling to lose? Hale turned to Ramirez, his voice cold and resolute. "Get me the status on that final weapon. We can't let Zarnok have another shot." The countdown had begun, but this time, Hale wasn't waiting for the storm to hit. He was preparing to strike first. The nightmare had only just begun, and for Zarnok, there would be no escape. With a glance at the screen, Hale spoke one last time: "We end this now." And as the final battle loomed, the fate of Lorien 9 hung in the balance, waiting for the humans' last stand, or their final triumph.